Sometimes that is better.
The Men Who Kicked Down My Back Door by O.G. Kings. This is going to be long. Apologies if it doesn't make much sense. I have panic attacks when I think about it and struggle to put it all together. This happened back in 2021. I was a female, 27 years old, and had just moved from Melbourne to rural Australia to live with my fiancé, then boyfriend, a 29-year-old male. He was on a military posting at the army base, and we also moved there to escape Melbourne's insane COVID lockdowns. The town I moved to is pretty isolated, about 4 to 5 hours to reach any large city in each direction. But it was big enough, with a few different suburbs surrounding the main area. Neither of us knew the area before moving, and this led to him getting a house in a pretty sketchy part of town. I'll try and explain the setup of the house, as this will be important later. The house was old, with huge glass windows everywhere, including the entirety of the front of the house. Because of this, you could see into the kitchen, the living room. It was kind of an open plan, and one of the unused bedrooms without coming down the driveway. There was an old metal fence to the left of the house, which was about 1.5 meters tall, that went directly into the backyard, and to the right of the house was a small path, hidden by overgrown bushes and plants from the front, with a locked gate the height of the house that led to the back semi-enclosed patio and back door. The path was right next to the kitchen window, but it was a window that you couldn't see out of when the kitchen light was on, but you could see in. When coming in through the back door from the patio, you would walk through the laundry with an adjacent bathroom into the kitchen, with our bedroom off to the left, and a second bedroom directly next to ours. Our bed was on the wall that connected to the living room, which meant it looked right out to the backyard, as it also had huge glass windows. My boyfriend was out in the field for a week, so I was home alone. It was summer during this time, and it was hot. The house had terrible AC, so I'd been sleeping with the windows open and had even left the back door wide open on accident when falling asleep a couple of times. I've always felt safe in Australia and have lived mostly alone since I was 18, so I didn't have an issue with it. It came to a Friday, my 5th day alone, and I decided to walk into town for something to do. The walk took about an hour each way, and when I finally got home, I was looking forward to doing nothing besides getting out of the heat. I spent most of the afternoon and evening in the living room playing PlayStation and watching TV. I'd heard a few noises down the side of the house on the path next to the kitchen and leading to the patio that night, but the guy who lived next to us had a workshop of some kind, so I assumed it was him tinkering around. I am one of those people who will lay in bed before they're ready to go to sleep, so I went in to lay in bed around 10 p.m. and was doing my nightly scroll of Let's Not Meet. This saved me, as it prompted me to get up out of bed and go close and lock the back door. The back door had a normal lock, and then a reinforced deadbolt with a key. It was screwed into the wall. 45 or so minutes later, still hearing the neighbor tinking around occasionally, I decided I was ready to actually go to bed, so I went and started turning off all the lights, including the back patio light and kitchen light. I laid down in bed and was finishing up my mindless scrolling, and I heard some noise again, but this time it was a bit louder. Again, I figured it was the guy still in his workshop or some kind of animal, so I decided to put my phone down and just go to sleep. After a couple of minutes, I heard a bang at the back door, and I instantly felt like everything went into slow motion. I instinctively knew someone was kicking the back door in, and I thought, this can't be happening. Then came another bang, and another. It was so loud, and I felt like the house was shaking. I heard glass shattering, and the banging was just continuing. This felt like it went on for an eternity, but it was really only a few minutes. In my panic after the second or third bang, thinking I could scare whoever it was off by pretending a man was there, I yelled out, "Oi!" in the deepest voice I could. Slammed my bedroom door closed. I have no idea why I did any of that. Locked the door and called 000 and then pushed my bed against the door. The banging was still going on when I started the call to the police, but then it stopped. There was nowhere to hide, so I was crouched down in the corner of the room near the bed. While on the phone to the 000, I could hear someone start kicking the bedroom door. I was screaming at that point. I don't remember what I was saying to 000 or what they were saying to me, but I remember praying for the police to arrive before whoever was out there got inside the room. I heard sirens in the distance, and the banging on the bedroom door stopped, and then I saw torches shining into the bedroom window. Because I was so scared, I couldn't understand what the 000 operator was saying to me, so I had no idea if the torchlight was whoever just kicked in my back door and bedroom door, or if it was the police. I don't remember how I realized, but it was the police, and the next thing I remember I was in the kitchen surrounded by about 10 police officers, crying and trying to explain to them what had happened. I was so inconsolable that the police had to use my boyfriend's army photos on the fridge to get his details to call the duty officer to get him to come home. Once I calmed down a bit and my boyfriend got home, I saw the back gate to the patio was broken. The bedroom door was cracked. The back door had been kicked off its hinges and the deadlock completely ripped out from the wall, and the laundry window was also smashed. There were 2 sets of clear footprints on the door from where they had kicked it in. I checked my phone, and I'd called 000 at 12:04 a.m. and had been on the phone for less than 5 minutes. What I think happened is that whoever it was followed me back from my walk and could easily see from the road that I was alone. They must have been watching me on the path next to the kitchen for that entire evening. The noises I thought the neighbor was making was actually them, and once I turned the lights off, they made their move. I don't think they anticipated the back door to be so hard to break down, which is why they smashed the laundry window to unlock it, but couldn't unlock it without a key, so they went back to kicking. But, in the end, it saved me from whatever they were going to do. They weren't ever caught, and we ended up moving house within the next few weeks. My boyfriend and I ended up breaking up as he was regularly out in field or on duty at night, and I couldn't be home alone at night anymore and would panic, cry, and not sleep until the sun would come up. It put too much strain on the relationship. It wasn't until later that I realized I was experiencing PTSD. I now live back in my home city in an apartment building that has 24/7 security and 1 billion cameras, and I have 2 dogs. So, to the guys who kicked in my back door and attempted to get into my room, I have no idea what you were going to do to me, but let's not meet. Retired Paramedic Story by Sniffin' Lippy. Retired paramedic here. Had a call on a very desolate stretch of road for a car sitting in the middle of the road, covered in blood. Of course, it had to happen at 2 a.m., just like every horror story. We arrived on scene and found a new Camaro sitting in the middle of the road that had obviously been in an accident. Problem was, there was absolutely nothing else around the car. No persons, no other vehicles, nothing. Part of my job then was a tactical paramedic for our sheriff's department. Sounds all exciting and high-speed, low-drag, but nope, not as a medic. I got paid to wait for stuff to happen and sit in the rear with the gear. That being said, my paramedic partner and I both had pistols in the ambulance. As we started approaching the Camaro, my partner was shining a light around when he said really low, hushed and rushed, "Back, back, 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 back. Now, now, now." I shined my light in the car, and there were intestines wrapped around the gear shift and a lung in the back seat. So we kind of freaked out, called dispatch and let them know what was happening, and we were in the process of getting out of there till the cops showed up, when we saw a figure appear, walking down the road towards us. As he got closer, we saw he was covered in blood and gore. We both threw on our tactical vests, helmets, and snatched our pistols, and I sounded like a frightened Home Alone 9-year-old on the radio to dispatch. We approached him and started screaming at him to get on the ground, which he did. And after everyone's heart rate was below 200 BPM, we started talking and figured out what happened. This guy had purchased a brand new Camaro and drove it to this desolate stretch of road to open it up. He said 1 minute he was shifting gears, and the next thing he knew his car was all over the road and his mouth was full of blood and it seemed like an explosion had gone off. I started looking his injuries over and couldn't really see anything major and asked him about the passenger in his car. He said, "What passenger?" My partner said, "There's a lung in your back seat." Dude went straight into mental overload and couldn't come up with anything, so I was thinking he's hurt. We got him in the ambulance, and police were 5 minutes away, and we potentially had another victim out there, and I had to go look by myself. I walked through the crash scene, looked in the car, and sure enough, intestines wrapped around the gear shift, lung in the back seat, and looked like part of a liver. It looked like a hand grenade had gone off in the car. I walked around to the other side of the car and saw a faint blood smear stain on the road, and I walked towards it, and I saw something else further down the road, so I kept walking towards it. I finally saw something on the side of the road and ran up to it, honestly completely freaked out and scared to death about the body I was about to see. And the dude had hit a deer. What happened was when he was winding the car out, state police estimated him well over 100 miles per hour, and a deer jumped into his car's pathway and hit the top corner of the windshield with its stomach. When it hit the windshield, it created a negative vacuum in the car, sucking almost all of the deer's organs out and right into his car and all over him. I had the fire department decontaminate him, wrapped him in some blankets, and took him to the hospital. For many, many years after this, my wonderful 911 dispatchers happily played the recording for anyone who wished to hear it. A Very Bizarre Robbery by Marzipan Inevitable 55. So I'm a 29-year-old male. This happened when I was 20, and it has led to some charming anxiety issues, which were actually only addressed about 6 months ago. I've been told the best way to cope with things is to confront the issues head on, and in a way that's what I'm trying to accomplish. So, before I got my life together, I used to work odd jobs around my hometown's neighboring towns. It was my way of avoiding college and going into the oil field. I made my money fixing fences, cleaning out horse stalls, and unloading hay and feed. Not actually bad work, to be honest, but I'll admit that I used it as an excuse for not doing more with myself. When I knocked off of work, there was this one little country-style gas station that I used to go to because they never ID'd, and it was easy to get a bottle of liquor or a six-pack, and they sold some of the best fried chicken that even to this day I've ever had. Well, on this particular day, there was nobody at the register. It was a little after 5 in the afternoon, and there were literally only 3 employees at this store, as it was a family-owned and operated place. I had plans with a girl that I was seeing, and I promised her a six-pack and a night of relaxation at her place while her parents weren't home. I was in a hurry because of this, so I went to inquire about why nobody was working. I went into the back room of the store, where I found the owner along with 4 other guys playing poker on a fold-out table. I said I needed to make a purchase, and he said he would be there in a minute. The owner, while a very good man, definitely had his share of addictions. At this time he was high on something, which could have been a number of things. He told me to sit down and play a few hands. The owner was wearing a vest that had all of his money clipped into it. I told him that I wasn't trying to lose any money, and he offered to float me the buy-in. I said I'd rather not, but 20-year-old me was always much easier to persuade. I'm not a good card player, but something my family had always told me was that I have more luck than I do sense, and within an hour of playing I had made enough money to give the owner his entry fee back, and still had a lot of money left over. I'll put it this way. This wasn't an extremely high-stake game of cards, but after paying the owner his fee, I was holding on to close to $4,000. I'm not a gambler, and you'll learn why, so I'm not even sure to this day how the dynamics work. We were playing, talking shit, drinking beer, and smoking cigarettes. Just a good time. And then the time became not so good. The beep from the front door rang into the back room. I'm one for punctuality, at least when it comes to doing your job, so I was a little annoyed when the owner didn't tend to whoever was coming into the store, much like he didn't tend to me when I initially walked in. It's a random irk of mine. This part still gives me chills to think about. I could hear the clacking of steel-toed boots hitting the floor, which made its way towards the back room that we were in. Didn't seem like much, meaning that it wasn't completely out of the ordinary. Then the door of the room flew open, and 4 guys entered the room, all wearing either red or blue bandanas over their faces. As far as their attire, they didn't look much different from anybody else, and 2 wore cowboy hats, and the other 2 wore trucker-style caps. All 4 were holding shoulder-durable weapons. We were all ordered to our feet, and everyone complied. It took me longer than expected to register what was actually happening. The table was slipped over, and 5 of us, minus the owner, were forced against the wall at gunpoint. There was a guy on the door who apparently missed orientation because 2 of the guys in our party had slipped past him and he had to chase them down through the main store. The 4 of us that remained were held against the wall by a guy holding what I assume now to be an M16 assault rifle. The owner was taken, beaten, and one of the guys that I'm assuming or have always assumed to be the ringleader took a buck knife and cut his clothing off. I honestly thought that was going somewhere else, but I guess thankfully it didn't. One of the guys started duct taping his ankles and his wrists. At the time I was thinking, okay, they're just going to restrain us, take the money, and then leave. Not ideal, but that's manageable enough. Then they put what looked like a pillowcase or a sack and put it over his head, and then sloppily started wrapping duct tape around it. 20-year-old me wasn't having it. A bunch of punks with guns weren't going to walk in and start messing with me or my company. Boy, was I stupid. I threw a nearly empty Heineken bottle at the owner's primary assailant, then progressed towards him. The bottle went nowhere near where I was aiming, and I literally lifted 1 foot off the floor and didn't even put it down before I was struck and fell back into the wall. The guy that hit me screamed in my face. I don't even remember what he said. It still gives me a panic attack when I try to revisit it. The remainder of us were duct taped by our wrists and ankles as well, and at one point I had the barrel of a rifle in my face, and the guy next to me, God bless his soul, chastised the guy by saying, "You want to point that at somebody, then point it at me, not him." The next part screws with me in a variety of ways that I don't even know how to explain. One of the masked men pointed the rifle at him and then pulled the trigger. All that could be heard was a metallic click. I don't know all about all of them, but the one who pulled that trigger definitely didn't have a loaded gun, which leads me to believe that the guns were just props. They took the money and shut the lights off and left the store. The back room had no windows, so it was dark, like really dark. I kept a multi-tool in my pocket for work, but it wasn't one of the heavier grade ones. It was a 2x2-inch one that could fit in my wallet, but I always kept it loose in my pocket during the day. It took some flexibility on my part to contort my restrained body enough to be able to get it out of my pocket, but I was eventually able to free myself. For whatever reason, I thought the owner was going to suffocate, so I went to free him first. He was fine, just in pain. Everybody made it out there with trauma at most, no fatalities. The 2 that got away were found restrained the same way in the walk-in freezer. The police were called. No investigation was ever conducted, and I couldn't even drive myself home. I had to call my sister to come pick me up. I don't know about what was actually in store for us and what would have happened if we didn't comply, but this is the source of many anxiety attacks, and the reason I'm partially afraid of the dark.